This apart a bit more international perspective on Europe's growing anti-immigration trend now with Daniel Wagner, who's joining us on the line from our Washington DC studio. Mr. Wagner, good evening. In a sense, the Schengen zone's come to define the EU, hasn't it? Its openness, its transparency. How would doing away with the free travel zone affect the perception of the European Union after all these knocks it's already coming under at the moment?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's right to get too excited about this. First of all, it's happening, as you rightly pointed out in your report, during the electoral process in France when, right-wing political orientation is certainly rising. Bear in mind that the Schengen Agreement, Article 2, permits countries to temporarily suspend the Schengen Agreement for a variety of different purposes. France has done this a couple of times in the past. They've done it in 2004 for D-Day celebrations. They did it in 2005 following the bombings in London. And a number of other countries have done something similar. Spain is going to be doing it later this week for its own reasons, for sporting events and for a variety of international conferences. This is not uncommon. I think it's making headlines right now because of the French electoral election and the rise of the right.
I mean, not just in France. This story, or the similar kind of story, has been in the headlines quite a lot recently. I mean, what's driving it? Is it social? Is it political? Or maybe an emotional outlet over all the economic strife that Europe's going through at the moment?
I would agree that there's certainly an economic element here. There's a move toward economic nationalism on a variety of fronts with a variety of different countries in Europe for different reasons. But what they all seem to have in common is the rise in immigration among North African immigrants, many of them originating from Italy, which has given them 6-month free travel. Visas that permit them to freely travel for at least 6 months. Of course, once they're in the Eurozone, who knows what happens to them after that? And I think that's really what the issue is here. I think there was an understanding when the Schengen Agreement was reached that there would be some commonality of purpose and commonality of approach to immigration, and it turns out that there have been some differences. So individual countries within the European Union rightly may disagree with them and have the right temporarily to take action to do something about it.
It's interesting, isn't it, that many of the politicians now are heading this way towards the right-wingers are and were staunch Eurocrats themselves. So if they're re-elected, they could well be facing a very different support base to contend with, couldn't they, in the future?
I think that's right. I think, when political season is on almost anywhere, people say things that they may ultimately regret or may change once they get into office. I think this theme, if you will, that is going on in Europe is not likely to disappear anytime soon. I think the rise of immigrants from North Africa are contributing to it, but are not the sole reason for it. It ultimately has to do with the economic pressures going on, and similarly to what we have in the United States. When economic times are bad, suddenly immigration becomes a hotter topic. When times are good, people don't care quite as much about it. I think that's part of what's going on here.
And it's interesting as well to think, during hard times, do people band together? Does it make you stronger? I mean, it's certainly not an easy time for the Union, with the euro crisis hanging heavy, extremely heavy over it. Would you say all this hardship is making the bloc stronger or splitting it apart? What are we seeing here?
Well, it sure looks like the strains are trying to split it apart. I don't think that's likely to happen. If the Schengen Agreement were ultimately to be revoked, I think there would be serious question about whether the European Union would stay in its present form. I really don't think that's likely to happen any more than it was likely to happen that Greece was going to be booted out of the EU because of its economic issues. That may yet turn out to be the case. It hasn't been so far. And I think where Schengen is concerned, the Eurocrats and politicians will do whatever they can to maintain unity because they realize what's at stake.
Thought, usually someone's loss is someone else's gain. Of course, all of this playing into America's hand a little with capital flying from the euro into the dollar. I guess America's gaining by seeing European troubles continue, no?
Well, I don't think very many people over here would hope that that would continue. I think there are some comparative advantages that the U.S. has over Europe right now. Some of the economic projections see Europe declining on a gradual and ongoing basis for years to come. If that's the case, it really doesn't benefit anyone. Given how globalized and interconnected the global economy is, it really would be in everyone's benefit if Europe got its act together and everything started going swimmingly as soon as possible.
Oh, for the perfect world. Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions. Thanks ever so much for being on the programme.